is a connection?
Connection is where you actually have a communication, really, isn't it? Between two or more things. Be that people or computers or the vacuum cleaner and the mains.
So if it's human beings, what does that mean?
Well, actually, there's a connection. There's some sort of commonality there, isn't there? Some understanding.
Is that what it is? You say a commonality and understanding. So do you mean by that, if you share, say, same interest, like, I don't know, some hobby or whatever, then that enables you to connect? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's a starting point.
Okay, but what is a connection? You're saying those things enable you to connect, but of course that isn't necessarily the case.
At the human level, it's intangible, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Let's follow this, because this is interesting. It might lead us somewhere profound. See, if we share the same interest, a hobby or something, like say you have an interest in model railways, and you join a club full of people who have interests in model railways, doesn't mean to say you're going to connect with the people there, or all of the people, or any of the people. You have an interest in the martial arts. You go to a club. And so one would imagine that all the people there have some sort of interest in the martial arts. But you wouldn't say you connected with them all, would you?
No.
So it's not just about having some kind of common interest, or even holding the same view. You can both hold the same view, but thoroughly dislike each other, and that will get in the way of making a connection. So while those things might be seen when people connect, you see a sharing of, you holding the same views, or some kind of common interest, that's not the connection itself, is it? Because you can have that and still not be connecting. So what is this? What is human connection? It is an intangible thing in one sense, isn't it? I mean, you think about Diana, Princess of Wales. There's an awful lot of people felt they connected with her, but they never met her, didn't know her. And yet when she died, you saw this outpouring of grief. Same today with this...
I was just going to say the Venezuelan,
Yeah.
Hugo Chavez. Yeah.
Yes, you see, a huge, great outpouring of grief. Most of those people would not have actually met the man. They might have related to what he said. They might have felt good because he'd talked their talk and he brought about some changes that they wanted to see and that benefited them. But would you say that there was a human connection there? Not necessarily. So you can have an outpouring of feeling, of emotion for another person, and yet you're not necessarily connected to them. In fact, if they died like Chavez, then obviously you're not connected with them because he's not there to connect with. You can connect with an ideal that you share. In that sense, you can connect with a common interest, like model railways, but that doesn't mean necessarily that there is a human connection there. Do you follow? It's like you can connect with thoughts, ideas, ideals, objects, behaviours. You can connect, but that's not the same thing as connecting it's what we're talking about when we say the human connection. Do you follow? Yeah. So that isn't what we're looking for. Let's identify what we mean by connection. See, whatever the connection is, whether it's, like you say, a plug in a socket, or connecting up with the internet, what is it? What are we saying when we say there is a connection?
Well, it's an information exchange.
Okay, plug in a wall. See? Information exchange.
Electricity, electrons flowing.
Yes, but the electrons are flowing because of the connection. The electrons flowing and not the connection itself, right?
That's right, no. Well, yes, it is the connection itself, because it's got to be good.
Yes, that's right.
You know, it's no good putting in a plug with all the pins made of plastic.
No.
You know, you connected the thing to the wall, but nothing's happening because the
connection's
because it's insulated. Yeah, you know, so it's got to be the pathway has to be open.
Right. It's more than that. So can we think then of a connection then of maybe as a coming together? Huh?
Yes.
A coming together, a touching, if you like, a meeting point. What prevents that meeting?
Well, on personal level, you mean?
Well, we can generalise, can't we? If we're talking about a connection, we can say that whatever it is, that what's going to prevent that is some obstruction, something in the way. The human connection. What is the obstruction there?
Fears.
Okay, which prevent us from doing what?
Being open and allowing the connection to take place.
Yes. People have become so removed, if you like, so defensive in their ways of approaching life, that they've forgotten what it is to be open. So many defences, ways of avoiding, meeting what is there. Not only the other, a human being, but ways of avoiding meeting a situation, an event. The interaction with a human being will result in some kind of event, you see, that one might want to avoid. Their anger, their displeasure, their criticism, pointing things out that we don't want to hear, or their involvement in something that is not going to support what we want, our interest. So we have ways to avoid the event. It might not involve other people. It might be a situation that one has brought about, created for oneself, that one then wants to escape from. Isn't this what we call consequence, you see? Through our actions we create consequences that we then want to escape from. Sometimes. We want to turn back the clock and try and, when we realise, we see where it's leading, we want to go back and do it differently. So if you say to people, talk about their lives and any regrets, anything you would have done differently if you knew then what you know now. So there was an outcome there that one didn't particularly want. See? But because one can't do that, go back and usually, quite often, do it again, then all one can do is try and avoid thinking about it or facing the outcome if it has an impact today. I worked with someone that was forever backpedaling and trying to recover lost ground because of that. Do you know what I mean? They do something, they behave in a certain way, and then see what the effect that it was having on the relationship or situation with another person, and then they will be trying to reclaim that lost ground, being overly nice or overly attentive or accommodating or whatever to try to get back to the place where they believe they were before they acted or behaved in that way. So maybe in this situation, the event we're trying to escape from is what's inside us. Maybe we're trying to get away from a feeling, the way we feel. We're not open to that. We might not be open to the image we hold of ourselves. I think that's so for many of us. It's like we have this image of ourselves, the way we perceive ourselves to be. But because it's not very nice, we don't like it, we kind of stay away from it. I found for myself over the years, I've seen that I used to have an image that I held of myself that kind of I saw reflected in my stepfather, the way that I perceived him. I then realised later that, my God, the way I saw him was the way I'm seeing myself, which wasn't very pleasant. But that's not in your face all the time, it's like there, behind the scenes, and every now and again it would pop up and I'd see it. Yeah, but you don't really want to see it because it's not very nice, especially if you don't know how to deal with it. So we try and escape from it, resist it. All the ways that we can avoid being open. All those defences, all those walls that we build up around us that keep us from what's there. So how can there be a connection when we're trying to avoid connecting, opposing it? So you can see the difficulty. There's a sort of a superficial coming together with people through some kind of common interest, or there's a sharing at that kind of level, worldly level, where you can have people in relationship and they never really connect. Just because they're married or they live together, they can be there together for 30, 40 years, but it doesn't mean to say they connect. When we connect really connect, when there is that meeting, and we'll come to that in a minute, but when there is that meeting, what we lose in that moment is the separation. Because it's all the things that we do to avoid connecting, whether it's with a thought or a feeling or with another person or an event, in the world, that leads to, all of that leads to that sense of isolation and separation. It's like the experience of ourself becomes enclosed. So people walk around in their own little worlds, cut off, and operate in a way that's where you don't necessarily have that real connection. I'm not making a blanket statement because there are always exceptions, aren't there? But it's rare. And of course what we're talking about in terms of this connection, that is human communication. Not sitting in front of a computer with information, not standing in front of another person sharing information. That's not what we mean by human communication. What we mean by human communication is when there is that meeting of humanness. I had this conversation with Chrissy, and we were talking, and it all comes out of a session that I had with someone some months ago, really. But it's like I was talking with Chrissy about connection and exploring this, and she reminded me that in her life there's only 2 people that she's ever found that remarkable experience where you are connected, where there is absolutely nothing in the way, where there's this kind of an openness there where you just are able to meet. But normally when you look into people's eyes, you stop there at the eyes, right? See, because they don't let you in. They can meet your gaze, you can meet their gaze, but they don't let you in, and you don't let them in. It stops there at the eyes, almost like they're, the windows are closed or frosted over. They can't see through the eyes, through your eyes, and you can't see necessarily through their eyes. They stop there. But she said there were just these 2 times with these 2 strangers, at different times, where she was having a conversation, as she does when she's on trains or other times in those kind of social situations. And she said it was strange because I could go right inside their eyes and meet them. It was like there was nothing in the way, and her expression was, they just let me in, and it was weird because it's a stranger, and yet there was this deep recognition of this other human being. And of course we've had this, when there's nothing in the way, and there's that connection. Very, very special, see, when that happens. That's communication, see, when there's nothing in the way. Normally it doesn't happen. A person that I was working with, it all came out of a session we had where it's a business person, and they went to a business meeting, and there were other people there who were organising and running this meeting, and they were saying just how disconnected it all felt, and how rude they were, and how some of them quite aggressive, and they were meeting your eyes and talking at you, but even though that they were meeting your gaze, it was almost like you were bouncing off their eyes. There was no way through to the person. Quite often it's like this with the role that a person plays. You know what I mean? They present a role, or they present a public face, but they don't let you in to themselves that's sort of playing the role, if you like. They don't let you meet them. And as we say, we've got amazing ways of being able to keep people out, or keep the world out, or keep ourselves from touching something, whether it's our own feelings or our own fears, thoughts, images. But when we don't do that, when we really are open, and there's a word that we can throw around, openness, and it becomes like a concept in our mind, openness, and we have all these ideas about what it is to be open, and why it's important to be open, and all the rest of it. But that's not the same thing as being open. But it's only by being open that we will ever realise why that is as important. See, as long as it's just theoretical, then it just remains at that level, and we can find other ideas and reasons of why it should be the way to approach life, but it's only when we actually become, if you like, or allow that openness, that a whole new world opens up to us. This is communication. So the question is, what is it that's connecting, you see? What is it that one's recognising or making contact with when you go through someone's eyes in that way, when you connect? I mean, I get it sometimes in the chair with people, where there's nothing in the way. You get those very sort of rare moments where there is truly nothing in the way. There's just a complete sort of open channel there. And it's, at that moment, it just feels, it's a completely different sense of existence. You don't feel separate and cut off. There's no real feeling of restriction there. There's no attempt to control anything, even necessarily to say anything in that moment. There's just that meeting of whatever. There's that meeting there, you see. That recognition. From this you can see that, we bandy this word about, this communication. And most people believe they are communicating. But there's never this sharing of, or this meeting, if you like, of existence. Meeting with that existence. Meeting with that sort of wholeness of experience. Of course, what you find is, of course, we'll ask the question that we haven't answered yet, which is, what is it that one discovers when one looks through and allowed inside another person's world, eyes, you see, when there's that meeting there. What is it that one is meeting? And the answer, of course, is that one's meeting oneself. One's meeting oneself. One's recognising at that moment oneself. something that can't be put into words, can't even really be thought about. Okay? But at that moment, it's like you realise what, in a sense, what has been sort of absent. One realises that one has been asleep, and as you say, one's been caught up with one's baggage and one's fears and one's worries and one's opinions and one's beliefs and one's attempts to get somewhere, to do something, to whatever. You realise at that point we've been asleep, and it's like at that moment everything's different. When we find that other person, then we find ourselves. And this is why relationships are so important. You can, of course, find yourself in everything. In some other sort of sentient being, an animal, a bird or whatever, you can find yourself there. And you can make that connection. St. Francis, history tells us, was communicated with the animals and the birds. You can enter into, you see, and find yourself in anything really. But normally it's in, we think of in our lives, it's like in human relationship with a human being. Through relationship, which is in a way is a journey of discovery, isn't it? See, whether it's a relationship here, or whether it's a relationship with another person that we live with, is very important. See? Because then, of course, we really, initially, when we come together with a human being and we attempt to get closer, we come up against all the resistances, all the, as you put it, the ways of living and being that prevent us from getting close. All the defences, all the baggage, all of that's in the way. Quite a lot of relationships, what happens is at that point, when things get a bit tough, difficult, confusing, people, part. Think, I'm not having any more relationships. But it's through relationship that we begin to wake up to ourselves. It's like the relationship becomes like a mirror, big, bright, shining mirror that reflects. In that mirror we find our own existence. Very important. A marriage is a coming together, isn't it? And not necessarily a piece of paper, but a marriage is that coming together, is the relationship that enables one to gradually move towards this connection, this realization of oneself. We can actually think of life itself. Are you wedded to life? See? Are you wedded to life? Because we can look at life like our partner, can't we? See? Take life as a whole, and we can think of life as being our other half. It's interesting because we think of relationship like that when people talk about their husband or their wife. They used to refer to them as my other half, that which will complete me. So if we look at the way that we approach life, we can see our relationship there. Now, of course, in order to do that, connect with life in the way that we've been talking about, connecting with the human being, and we did say we can find ourselves in any of it out there. But in order to connect with life, what's ultimately required is a letting go of all the stuff that we've been talking about. We've got to let go of control or trying to manipulate the situation, see? Or trying to make it a particular way. In other words, trying to influence that other person. That doesn't lead to connection. that doesn't lead to communication. It's the same with life. It's like the wise tell us that it's the letting go of that personal will that's always looking for just self-interest, self-gratification. If you're going to meet, if you're going to be wedded to life, if you're going to be wedded to that other person, if you're going to connect in that moment, you've got to let go of all of that. Because all of that is binding. So through our relationships, in a way, we transcend all that. There's the possibility and the capacity there to transcend the way that we approach life, the struggle with it all. So next time when you're having a conversation with someone or you're meeting with someone, just sort of bring this to mind, the fact that unless there is, just observe to see how connected one is, or how distant one feels. That distance between, that prevents that kind of level of intimacy that we're talking about. Of course, the great Sufi poet Rumi, who talked of life as his beloved, was always looking to get closer, to connect. You go and read some of his poetry. It's amazing. But in order to do that, one has to stay open. And that is so difficult when one fears pain. It's really then the discipline is to cultivate that open heart, to open it. Which means, of course, that one's got to allow oneself to feel all of it. And the same, I suppose, with the mind. It's, cultivating an open mind rather than a closed, biased mind, prejudiced mind. And of course, most of us, if we look, we can see we have very closed minds.